Welcome to the final half of the Right Nationalism Network seminar entitled Soros Civil Organization, organizational dissection of two George Soros Civil Action orgs on two different continents, MoveOn.org in the United States and GetUp.org.au in Australia. The word avaz is a transliteration of the Sanskrit term voice, a term that was incorporated into the modern standard Hindi lexicon. Sanskrit is the primary liturgical language of Hinduism, a philosophical language of Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Isvarism and Jainism, and a literary language and lingua franca for the educated of ancient and medieval India and Nepal. Core ideology is everything when it comes to the dissection of subversive movements, especially when the core ideology being inculcated is religious or pseudo-religious. This is where it all starts to get very esoteric. UNESCO World Heritage is the official organ of the UN with responsibility over protection of world locations with special cultural or natural significance. World Heritage sites are assigned reference numbers by UNESCO and can be seen from their official website. If one navigates to UNESCO World Heritage Site number 666, one will notice that Lumbini, Nepal is known as the birthplace of the Lord Buddha. This official page for Lumbini reveals the reference to be number 666, a fact confirmed on the listing which states 666 REV or Rev, to indicate that at some point this number was revised. In fact, the number seems to have been changed sometime in the 1990s. This number has very sinister connotations in the Christian New Testament, appearing in the book of Revelation, where it is allocated as a semiotic signifier of the beast, a character which represents the birth of the Roman Empire, yet in an eschatological context where it swallows up the entire world. The number is specifically referred to as the mark of the beast, and is forced upon all the peoples of planet Earth, who have to receive it so they can, and I quote, buy or sell. Coincidentally, it turns out that the element of carbon, the element of organic chemistry and the building block of all life on this planet, bears the number 6 on the periodic table of elements. Within the particle trinity of the atom, in by far its most common isotope, 98.9% of all carbon on this planet is known as carbon-12, which has 6 protons, 6 neutrons and 6 electrons, making it symbolically the 666 building block of all life, including the symbolic number of all hydrocarbon energy, which is the lifeblood of all industrialized society, making it also the foundation of all economic development. Any entity which can gain control of the carbon cycle of the planet, the 666 element, can control the entire planet and every man, woman, child and animal, almost as if the world were a slave plantation full of chattel property. Such a carbon control system would make the perfect basis of a universal identification number which tracks every person's so-called carbon footprint, and such a number may also be mandated globally in order for the bearer to have access to, quote, buy or sell in the global marketplace. No number, no ability to earn a wage, no ability to feed oneself or one's family. In regards to Lumbini, Nepal, and World Heritage Site number 666, there's an old saying, follow the money. This massive religious site is being developed by a shadowy trust controlled by a foundation called APECF, or Asia Pacific Exchange Cooperation Foundation, which is mostly a front for the Chinese Communist Party. China is contributing most of the $3 billion invested in this foundation. However, the 2011 list of leaked joint chairmen reveal it to be also funded and managed by 5 interesting characters. Stephen Clark Rockefeller Jr. from the infamous Rockefeller Brothers Fund family, whose father was a Zen Buddhist and whose fund has been leading the charge of the global warming scam. Jack Rosen, a Jewish New York real estate mogul who is chairman of the super influential American Jewish Congress and a member of the executive committee of AIPAC. Pushpa Kamal Dahal Parachanda, chairman of Nepal's Maoist party, fought a 10-year war ending in the death of over 17,000 people. Paras Bikram Shah, Nepal's ponytailed playboy former crown prince known for letting fly with his gun and fists first and asking questions later. And lastly, Leo H. Charney, a Jewish real estate tycoon from the US, who was a former US presidential advisor to Jimmy Carter, notable for his behind-the-scenes action during the Camp David Accords regarding the Egypt-Israel peace agreement. 2 out of 5 for Buddhism, it's 40% Jewish, just ahead of the 1/3 representation of Jews on the US Supreme Court. It is of course no surprise that from 6% to as high as 30% of non-Asian Buddhists are Jews, even though Buddhism is non-theistic, eschewing the idea of a universal creative deity, making it utterly heretical to Jewish theology, even though many Jewish Buddhists proclaim to practice both beliefs simultaneously. The adoption and promotion of Oriental religions, especially Buddhism but also Hinduism, is hardly congruent with the aims of globalism. The reason for this are threefold. Firstly, Almost half the world's population resides in southern, southeastern, and eastern Asia, with China and India having over a staggering 1.3 billion apiece. Capturing this area economically and integrating it into a new world order is not only challenging due to the cultural impenetrability of Asians, but also quite necessary in order to create an eventual world government with technocratic control over the entire planet. Secondly, developed majority white nations of European racial extraction are historically Christian, a cultural artifact which, due to its moral absolutism, has always been the number one obstacle globalists have encountered in attempting to move these nations towards Marxian socialism and secular moral relativism, both of which are necessary in order to destroy their internal cultural cohesiveness. In these countries, self-proclaiming Christians undoubtedly make up the core of every conservative and right-wing political fold, holding libertine forces at bay. With the advent of New Age religions aligned with the Oriental world, Christianity can slowly be replaced, or at least critically disrupted, so they think. Thirdly, Buddhism in particular, with its non-theistic outlook and flowery appearance, can be used to lay the foundations for a new world religion, where the concept of salvation can be removed from the metaphysical sphere and instead enshrined into the material sphere as a new system of carbon indulgences managed by men posing as saviors of the physical planet. In reality, they are just neoliberal slave masters of a new planetary plantation, maintaining their frequent jet-set lifestyles and multiple mansions all over the planet. To solidly illustrate this third agenda, where a new religion founded by Buddhism replaces Christianity, it should be noted that at the first ever so-called World Day of Prayer for Peace in 1986, held at Assisi in Italy and hosted by Pope John Paul II, a deliberate ritual desecration of a Christian altar was performed, with the heads of 32 Christian religious organizations and representatives from 11 other non-Christian religions present, including the Dalai Lama. This October 1986 event was the largest gathering of world religious leaders in world history. It was held in Assisi because Francis of Assisi is the patron saint of environmentalism in Catholic hagiography, undoubtedly the real reason that the current Pope Francis has adopted this papal name. The Catholic Church, in its modern incarnation, being the largest single unitary religious communion in the world, has been chosen to spearhead the birth of this new and heretical pseudo-religious concern, to the chagrin of millions of traditionalist Catholics who oppose this heresy posing as ecumenism. Pope Francis is the chosen prophet of this new system, which is posing as environmentalism. With all the heads of the major Christian communions present in St. Peter's Church in Assisi, seated in view of the altar, the Dalai Lama and a contingent of Buddhist monks were invited to place a golden idol of the Buddha in a glass case onto the consecrated Christian high altar, which is supposed to represent the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Buddhist signs were erected and incense was burned while they worshipped it. Not one of the bloated and evidently irrelevant Christian leaders objected to this sacrilege, where a non-theistic Oriental idol ritually usurped the aniconic and unmovable concept of the theistic altar of Christian salvation. This should give some idea of the seriousness of the globalist movement we are exploring, but especially the heavy Jewish organizational and financial involvement, which was of course the reason for the first actual sacrifice of Jesus Christ in 33 AD, betrayed into the hands of the Romans, the beast 666. In the last few decades, the rise of Christian home churches in China has caused a future existential crisis for this regime, which requires base materialism, or at least a materialist religion or philosophy, to keep its citizens from rising up against the current regime. This existential crisis for the Chinese regime, which was birthed by a murderous Maoist form of communism holding an ideology inherited from Karl Marx, an atheist Jew, aligns the purposes of both globalist Jewry and the Chinese regime. Promotion of a new materialist religion founded on Buddhism, or at least pseudo-religious oriented principles, can assist both of these forces in eradicating Christianity. If we look at the particular groups in the Western world who are being mobilized, tapped, and manipulated by these civil action organizations, they can be organized into the following simple model, involving an outer ring of identity politics culture war battalions marching in phalanx packs towards the traditionalist cultural heart of our Western cultures. First, there are the old-school communist movements, with the usual cry to end capitalism and lead us all into a Bolshevik utopia. Then we have groups such as Antifa, who claim to be anti-fascists, but are mostly stacked with mediocre intellectual infants who wouldn't know the first thing about neoliberalism and how it operates. Then we have the new atheists, militantly seeking to replace the moral system enshrined in Christian culture by tipping their fedoras towards some non-existent humanism, a concept with no real meaning without, well, a meaning. Then we have the LGBT+++ whatever sexual and gender bender crowds steering society into a biological and moral cul-de-sac, nay, an abyss. Then we have the racialist movements such as Black Lives Matter and indigenous peoples advocacy groups yelling to kill Whitey, but there will also be some co-opted white identity groups used to clash with the former to energize them. Then we have the feminist movements, promoting virtual infanticide as some kind of sacrament to prove sovereignty over their own bodies, ranting about the gender pay gap and dressed in pussy hats or shrieking while naked down the streets like escaped insane asylum patients about God only knows what. Then we have the anarchists who think they can live in a vacuum while still being able to protect themselves from whatever force outside of that vacuum would like to acquire any property they possess. And last, but definitely not least, we have the super powerful anti-Semitism police such as the ADL and the SPLC, who could probably find a reason to mention the Holocaust during a cooking show, the ultimate perpetual white guilt and deflection mechanism, converting all criticism of their ethnocentric internationalist wealth and power networks into an automatic endorsement of Zyklone B bug killer. All of these diffuse culture war battalions are not only useful for destroying the cohesiveness of the culture within white Western nations, but their left-wing participants can also be used to promote core ideologies such as the global warming movement. As they tussle with the world, and sometimes with each other, on this outer ring, internally they are being steered as a host with which to propel this innocuous secondary cause, a masterstroke of next-stage neoliberalism, posing as a virtuous and almost religious aim for humanity. These groups, if not openly promoting the Green Movement as Move On and Get Up both do as a priority issue, can at least cloak the subversive nature of this core issue by failing to fight against its true neoliberal nature, a nature which left-wingers should be naturally opposed to, but alas, they are deeply deceived. Now that we have explored the true motivations of these two organizations, let's have a look at the overview of how they are operating within society and within government. We will focus on Move On in the United States, while remembering that Get Up is merely a clone of this same system, though on a smaller level. George Soros and his Open Society foundations steer the ideological agenda of Avaaz, no doubt organizing funding arrangements through Open Society and allied organizations. Avaaz then high-level manages the direction of Move On, in like manner assisting with high-level operational requirements. George Soros and his deep state connections have already arranged for the rise of puppet political talking heads such as Barack Obama and various Congress critters, who were then assisted in their campaigns by the pressure from above facilitators, the Move On Political Action Committee. By getting their candidates elected, these candidates can then arrange for this pressure from above action through the control of levers of government. While the PAC is working directly with the candidates, assisting their fundraisers, organising media campaigns and smearing the opponents of their candidates, the lower-level Move On Civic Action Org is putting in place the pressure from below movements by seeding certain operatives in the already existing culture war battalions previously mentioned. The key focus of this particular group is always academia, where a large pool of highly energized but naive bullhorn fodder can be recruited. These civil action operatives can steer these groups to vote for and promote their candidates while simultaneously attacking their opponents, who will naturally be right-leaning and conservative, thus naturally opposed to the libertine causes represented by these hordes of easily manipulated muppets. These civic action operatives can supply small quantities of funding and other on-the-ground resources to these groups, while also recruiting further valuable assets within these groups to incorporate into Move On Civic Action. By keeping a frequent personnel exchange between the two levels of the Move On organization, the group can feed the ambitions of their members. While these organizations apply this vice-like pressure from above and pressure from below, they are simultaneously forcing right-wing candidates to shift leftwards with the cultural zeitgeist in order to stay within the Overton window of acceptable social expectations. By shifting right-wing candidates far enough left, the most dangerous aspects of the neoliberal agenda can be fully implemented, while the nationalist shields are down, allowing sovereignty to be destroyed forever, for instance using international treaties with multilateral organizations. The victim here is the industrialized and developed, moral and sovereign nation-state with a diversified economy, built over hundreds of years by the straight white male family man who protected his family unit and loved ones, the rock of Western civilization. As designed, it is all crushed from above and below. And let's not forget the compromised and almost entirely Jewish-controlled mainstream media in the United States, who have an invaluable role to play in this process. All of these highly concentrated media companies are parrots for neoliberal causes, fawning over the exploits of the culture war battalions, giving them airtime and in the process making lots of drama dollars. This socio-political circus is also a major source of funding for media companies, with a very large chunk of campaign finances raised going to pay for publicity. The Jewish George Soros and many of his virtual asset ultra-liberal Jewish media executives can ensure that the cultural zeitgeist is always shifting the right way, leftwards, towards the shrieking white noise of the lemming lunatic fringe. Swimming on this media side of the fence, we find even more PACs and so-called media watchdogs like Media Matters for America, spearheaded by the homosexual David Brock, another George Soros stooge. As can be seen here from Brock's last book launch for Killing the Messenger, held at Lynn Forrester de Rothschild's personal residence in New York City, these people swim in a very elite Jewish pond. Lynn Forrester de Rothschild is married to Evelyn de Rothschild, the official financial advisor of Queen Elizabeth II, and both spent their year 2000 honeymoon at the White House during Bill Clinton's presidency. Lynn de Rothschild was one of the foremost supporters of Hillary Clinton. This just so happens to be the same branch of the Rothschild family who owns The Economist Group, owner of The Economist magazine, and The Economist Intelligence Unit, who just so happens to have absorbed in 1986 the shadowy aforementioned Business International Corporation, the CIA front which employed Barack Obama fresh out of Columbia University. To round off all the coincidences, Evelyn de Rothschild's son, David Mayer de Rothschild, just so happens to have been the partner of none other than Al Gore during the worldwide Live Earth concerts, the biggest global warming propaganda fest in history, held on July 7, 2007, or 777. David even authored the official handbook for Live Earth entitled The Live Earth Global Warming Survival Handbook, 77 Essential Skills to Stop Climate Change or Live Through It. What a savior. On that note, I'd like to conclude this seminar by thanking everyone for attending. This seminar has merely presented the higher level organization of George Soros' Civil Action and PAC network, delving mostly into the ideology driving the neoliberal agenda he champions together with Jewish dynasties such as the British Rothschild family. A further sister seminar is being planned to more thoroughly dissect the organizational structure, modus operandi, and major events in the existence of these two organizations. I look forward to a thorough Q&A where I can answer any questions and take feedback. Thank you.